Hello friends and enemies, welcome back to Happy for Now. It's me, Isabel, here with my other favorite end of the year video. It's my favorites of the year, but I gotta caveat this year. 2022 was a weird reading year, so let's just hope that 2023 is even better, because it's not that I didn't read things I liked. I read a lot of things I liked. Didn't read a lot of things I loved, so it was really hard to come up with my top reads of the year list, but I landed on about 10 titles. We're going to talk about them. There's some honorable mentions that didn't make the list, so if you're like, oh wow, I'm surprised that isn't on here, it was close. I mostly just tried to think about the books that like I wouldn't shut up about and like have stuck with me the most throughout like, you know, 2022 and on. But yeah, it was a weird reading year. I don't feel like I'm the only one who had like a weird reading year. And again, it's not that like I read books I hated. I just read a lot of books that I was like, this is fine. This is not a favorite. So I'm really hoping to find a lot of new favorites in 2023. But so I don't count rereads on my favorites of the year list because I don't think that's fair. And because of that, I had to pick a new favorite / another favorite from this series. And it's going to be no surprise. It's a series I read most of last year. I will be reading the next 5 books of it, probably in April or May. I just needed a break from the world, but that is Caressed by Ice by Nalani Singh. This book surprised me. This book made those first 2 books worth getting through to get to this book because I absolutely loved Judd. Like I think everyone else pretty much that has read the series. I don't know a lot of people that didn't love Judd. You know, everyone told me just wait till you get to Judd, you're gonna love it. And here I am. I'm a sucker, an absolute sucker. I am trash for a man who doesn't know how to deal with emotions and feelings until he starts to fall in love. And that is what this book is. Through and through, that is what this book is. This is a really strong one because Nalani Singh, I think in this one, does such an amazing job mixing the love story and the world building into a really good cohesive plot that works magnificently. So that's where we're at. I loved this book. I cannot wait to reread Heart of Obsidian probably again this year and possibly this one. There's a couple of them that I came out of that read through that I was like, I would reread these. This is one of them. And I think it says a lot when I as someone who doesn't usually reread would reread a book. So Caressed by Ice, easily one of my favorites of the year. So let's talk about the next book on my list. This is one that I feel like I've screamed about for a while this year. I don't know that I've picked up sequels quicker this year in a series, nor that I've anticipated new releases as much as I have, and that is The Never King, or The Vicious Lost Boys series by Nikki St. Crow. This was a May find. She found this on TikTok. She read it, sent it to me and some of us, and we all ended up reading it and loving it. We've done some live shows talking about them. 3 of the books came out this year, so we got The Never King, The Dark One, and Their Vicious Darling, which these are all the special editions I got from her Patreon, which like very much have been worth it. I mean, absolutely stunning. So this series for me, I think what it captures is the extreme readability of some why choose romances, and part of why I like a lot of why choose romances, and also what I like about retelling / inspired by stories. This is definitely more inspired by, not a retelling, but for me, watching Peter, the Lost Boys, Vane, Bash, and Kaz, like all of them, Winnie, the lore that we're getting has been really intriguing, and every single book, in my opinion, this year like stepped up the game a little bit. So like this was really good, and then The Dark One was even better, and then Their Vicious Darling was even better. Somewhat predictable, sure, but I still had so much fun with my time reading these that for me, very much like just very easy to put onto my favorites list, like no questions. I love this series. I cannot wait to get my special edition of Their Vicious Darling. I cannot wait for the new book to come out, hopefully this year early. As soon as I get that arc from her, I will be reading it. Like this is just taken over my life in a way I never would have expected, and have absolutely adored every second I've spent in this world. I'm like hoarding the audiobooks to re-listen to the whole story once the last book comes out, like right before that last one comes out. I'm gonna marathon all the books and read the last book. So very excited, really excited to see where some of the spin-off potential is going as well. I don't know that I've ever been as interested as I am in a spin-off until recently with this one. I'm very hit and miss with spin-offs, so like for me to be like, yeah, I really want to read the spinoff of this. I don't want to spoil the spinoff, but the fact that I want to read it, I feel like says a lot in and of itself. So next we have another contemporary romance, and this is one that I had a feeling I would love. I wasn't surprised that I loved it, and that is Delilah Green Doesn't Care by Ashley Herring Blake. This is her adult debut, and honestly, I need to read some of her YAs because this was so fun. But for me, this book had Claire, our single mom Claire, who is just an absolute delight, and Delilah, our tattooed photographer who comes back to take pictures at her sister's wedding, but also teams up with her sister's best friends to dismantle this wedding and make it not happen, is everything I needed. There is great tension and play in here. But this is easily one of the best sapphic romances I read in 2022. For me, Delilah's inner struggle and turmoil was really relevant, felt real. I connected with it in a lot of ways I didn't expect to, especially her like desire to never return to her hometown. As someone who doesn't like have a hometown, but like has literally lived all over the country. Well, I've not lived like West Coast yet, but I'm sure the day is coming. Either way, I've lived all over the country, and I have places that I consider more home than not, but like when I had to put my hometown in my yearbook photo for my graduation, I just picked a place that I had lived because I quite literally didn't really feel strongly about anywhere. Because to me, like, home isn't a specific spot. It's like people I'm with. I hope that makes sense. Either way, I related to that turmoil because I don't have strong desires, generally speaking, to go back to a lot of the places I previously lived. There's a couple of them that stand out to me and that I do like visiting still, but they're not like, I don't know. I get it. Like, I don't want to run into people from then. I would be mortified if somebody commented on this and was like, I went to high school with you. I'd be like, oh my God, get out. But like, that's just me. So like, I related to that. I related to her feeling of being like kind of lost in her family at times. Just a lot of this book for me was very relatable, especially around Delilah. And then I also really loved Claire as our love interest and how her life functioned with her daughter and some of the stuff going on with her ex-husband who was kind of re-entering the picture and how they were handling that. He wasn't like vilified necessarily for his absences and things, but like she was trying to find the best way to handle it and protect her daughter from being hurt again by him, which I think is really, really fair assessment. But again, there was no like prevention of the dad like entering the daughter's life again, and I really just appreciated it. This was amazing. I really can't wait to read the sequel, and honestly I probably will reread this in 2023. All right, next is one that we're not going to talk about extensively because HarperCollins strike. If you're not familiar, HarperCollins union is on strike right now. We are 40 some days as of me filming this into the strike. They have not met at the bargaining table yet even, and for that reason alone, I'm going to tell you the title that I loved this book. Obviously, it's on my favorites, but I am also going to not say much about it, which sucks. I wish I could gush the way I get to gush about these other titles. And I did keep a few titles off my list because I didn't want to have too many HarperCollins titles that I couldn't talk about to y'all. So that is Heartbreaker by Sarah McLean. This was great. We had her on the Chapter 3 podcast if you're curious, and we talked to her about this book. So if you're curious about that, definitely go check it out. I'll link it down below for you, but I adored this. I can't wait for the next book, but we are not discussing it beyond that because of the strike. All right, next is a big surprise for me. So this is one I knew I would like, and I have been like slowly dosing myself out with her books, and that is The Tyrant Alpha's Rejected Mate by Kate C. Wells. If you're new here, I love Kate C. Wells. I loved Run Posey Run, and I've basically been like reading one every couple months, if that, for her, because I don't want to be done. I don't want to be caught up on her backlist, okay? Like, I just don't. And that's a me problem. It's fine. But this one for me, I really enjoyed how it turned the fated mate stereotype kind of on its head, because our heroine is fated to him and knows it and acts upon it and then is shunned because he rejects her. Well, he ends up finding her like in town trying to sell like mushrooms and stuff, like not like druggy mushrooms, like I don't think druggy. Either way, her and like some of the girls that live off in a building, like in a house by themselves, have kind of like started this side hustle, and they're not supposed to use tech and all these things, and they're off trying to do this, and he finds out, and he slowly starts to be like, what is going on? Why do I care? Why do I have feelings? And I love that he like has to go through this process to then realize when he actually rejected her was not when she attempted to mate him. It was actually at a different time in their life, and that they've known that they were fated mates since they were like children. And it's just, it honestly just really did a turn on the typical fated mates situation that we get. And I really appreciated it and enjoyed it. And I really loved our heroine and the really great friend group of women who don't have mates and are just trying to live in this group, in this pack, where they're kind of not appreciated and they're crapped on all the time. All right, next we have one of the books that made me cry, because how do we not have a book that made me cry on the list? I don't cry at a lot of books, so this is a special spot, and that's again by J.L. Seegers. This is a second chance at marriage novella. So J.L. Seegers' Restore Me book is like very long, so I have not read it yet because of that, and I was like, we'll start with her novella, see if I like her writing before I invest that much time in her book. I invested the time in the novella, and I am very ready to dive into the full-length novel at some point this year. This book was amazing. So this follows a couple that were childhood sweethearts, get married, and then things start to go south. There is miscommunication and a lot of issues around infertility. So there's a big content note in this book. It deals heavily with infertility and implied cheating, we'll call it. Our heroine is like continuing to have failed IVF rounds and things, and they're just having issue after issue. He's opening a restaurant. There's strained relationship stuff happening, and finally it breaks and they break up. And this book follows him knowing he is still madly in love with her and wants another chance with her, and their trip to Punta Cana to watch their siblings get married to each other, and it is incredible. I don't know how J.L. Seegers packed so much into a novella, but she did, and I'm so happy she did. And I'm so excited to see what else she writes. I cannot wait to explore more of her books, because this hit me in the gut. And I think she just does a magnificent job of this marriage in trouble trope / like second chance at marriage that we don't get often enough. And to be able to do that on your second book that well, mind blowing. Next, we do have a historical, another one. We have two, and that's A Lady for a Duke by Alexis Hall. This was a big surprise. I think my Goodreads review literally said, I'm mad I didn't read this sooner, because this was fantastic. Viola is presumed dead at Waterloo, and her childhood best friend, the Duke of Gracewood, is very depressed about it, has been injured at war, and all these things, and they were childhood best friends. And she ends up coming back around years later to find her best friend in this state, and decides to, for reasons, is there to help him come back around and heal and recover. He has a cane, and it's just this really slow, beautiful character growth book that is just an amazing romance, and truly, I can't do justice to the writing of this book. I do need to give a quick content note on this, though. There is a discussion of war, PTSD, and some ableist language, because the Duke does view himself as lesser due to his use of a cane and other things. But this was just magnificent, and I love reading historicals where we get representations that we know existed back then, but we don't often see reflected in our current day historicals that are being written. So like, I just think it's really important and a just magnificent read. Okay, next we're gonna go in a total opposite direction, and that's Kink Camp Hunted. This is one that honestly I didn't think would be on my favorites list, but here we are, because the more I think about this book, the more it lingers with me and sits on my brain, and it dealt with a lot. I'm noticing a theme this year, but this book follows a grieving widow who runs a kink camp, mostly because his wife was into these things, and he is particularly into primal play. He puts a note on the message board in the coffee shop every camp and requests for someone to chase, basically. And our heroine is there to explore kink for the first time, kind of in a safe environment with her friend, and we follow her and him. She signs up. It's only supposed to be a one-time thing. It is not a one-time thing, of course. Is it ever? It never can be. And we just slowly get to see him become human again, almost, in a way, and like heal and change and grow from the loss of his wife. And also we get to see her blossom into a more fully fledged version of herself, because she's exploring these things that she's always been interested in. The primal play in this is spectacular, in my opinion. I think this is one of the best ones I read this year, and I love primal play, so I'm so happy I read this. So next we have Queenie the Krakens by Elira Anya Siris. I think I got that right. I literally have the next book that follows Queenie's friend Lord's book on my Kindle right now. I need to read it. But this I put on the list because it also kind of stuck with me and surprised me, because again, I like my dark romances, but I'm not a big motorcycle club person. It's just not my thing. I don't love it. I like Kate C. Wells's, and that's about it. But this surprised me because Queenie, our heroine, has a lot going on. And a lot that like I didn't expect. I think part of my struggle with motorcycle club romances is often the female main characters are so helpless. It's annoying and it drives me batty. Like it just drives me batty. So because of that, I don't often read them. But this is a why choose one. She ends up in some trouble with one of the other motorcycle clubs, and the Krakens take her in, and she enters this really great why choose romance with a bunch of the guys. And they all protect her, but she also doesn't completely need their protection. And she goes and does some things towards the end of the book that like other heroines wouldn't manage to do to completion, if that makes sense. So I thought that was really nice to see. And I just really loved how independent she was, but also just how varied the guys in this romance were. It really was just a fun time, full of like a lot of reveals, and one of those things like I just couldn't put it down. So here we are. It's on my favorites. All right, and number 10 is Spiked Hot Chocolate by Rosie Adams. This is the last book I read in 2022, and I didn't think it would be on this list. But the more I thought about it like the last few days, I was like, no, this book deserves to be on my favorites list because I honestly think I'm going to reread it again next year. This book, for me, was like the perfect novella. It had just the right amount of banter, just the right amount of sex, just the right amount of like characterization and growth and building of this couple. This starts with our heroine. She has been dumped right around Thanksgiving by her ex of like 7 years, and she's not going home for Christmas, and her family's very upset. Her entire plan hinges on like sitting at home and watching Christmas movies by herself and just resting up. She goes on a dinner by herself. Well, and then our hero is a single dad, like divorced dad. He is giving up his time with his daughter for Christmas for her to spend her Christmas with her mom at her mother's wedding that got moved up and changed date-wise. So because of that, he was like, yeah, you can take her. It's fine. We'll do Christmas late. He and our female main character end up at a restaurant. She is eating her meal, reading her book, having a great night. Sounds like a great date with yourself to me. And she ends up not only sharing a table with him and not reading, and instead of having discussions with him, they decide to have a day where they spend together on Christmas Eve, and they go on this like adorable date situation, and they end up watching movies together. And it's just like, if I had to capture what I want out of a novella perfectly, this is that book, which is why it's on this list, because I just feel like it did everything in so few pages and gave me so much that I absolutely loved it. All right. And last but not least, we're going to close out with 3 honorable mentions that almost made the list. I just wanted to keep it at 10, so we kept it short and sweet. But those are Deceived by the Gargoyles by Lillian Lark. This is definitely very close on the list. I think if Spiked Hot Chocolate hadn't have shot up my list, this would have made it. But this is our Why Choose Romance with two with 3 gargoyles and our librarian at the magical library. This one was everything. I loved their dynamic. I loved their setup. I loved so much about it. So I'm very excited. I'm actually reading the Basilisk one, and actually just finished it, and it's really good too. So just was like peak monster romance perfection. Then we have Shipwrecked by Olivia Dade, which I have some qualms with, but I still just absolutely adored having 2 fat main characters, that it like is a very close second for me. But because of the strike, we're not going to talk about it beyond that. So there you go. Next, we have The Demon's Bargain by Katie Robert. This is probably my favorite Katie Robert I read last year, and I'm really surprised at how much I loved it. Not because I thought it was going to be bad or anything, but because it just, like, I'd heard things about it and I wasn't sure. Like, I got nervous because people loved it so much, and then I read it and I really loved it. We have a prickly heroine. We have a demon who is also pretty prickly and grumpy, and it is just delightful. There's pegging. It just, the discussion of like gender identity in this I thought was really great too. I really loved how our demon talked their gender identity and the fluidity of it and these things. Like it was so good, y'all. So very, very good. But those are all my favorites from 2022. Oh my goodness. Let me know yours in the comments, please and thank you. I really want to know. I always want to know these things since I want to put them on my TBR. I can't read them until like April if they're not already on my Kindle, but I do want to read them. So Let me know your favorites from the year, if you read any of these or if you're gonna pick them up. And if you don't want to do that, leave me a star emoji of your choice because, you know, these are all gold stars. And if you need links to any of these books I mentioned or links to Be My Friend anywhere on the internet, those will be in that description box. And I will see y'all in just a few days. Bye!
Already packing, come with me. I'm not really asking. We'll get away to a place where we don't know. About to see the world in action, what we can be. Life with no distractions. We'll get away.